What's going on, everybody? We got an awesome podcast today. If you are on social media and you like fishing, and possibly if you like jiu-jitsu or wrestling, you probably know our guest today, Benz Fishing, Aaron Benzrahem. He is Benz Fishing. He makes some fantastic content, and we have a fantastic conversation with him all about everything. Jiu-jitsu, fishing, entrepreneurship, a really great conversation. I really enjoyed getting to know him better, and I think you will too. Here we go.
What's going on, guys? My name is Aaron Benzrahem, aka Benz Fishing, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast.
All right, Aaron, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm really excited to be here. Big fan of yours, big fan of the podcast and what you're doing, so I'm excited to talk.
Thank you. Well, you're somebody I wanted to talk to. You've got an interesting background. You got Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You got a wrestling shirt on. You're a fisherman. I know we're going to get along just fine right away. What's your background? Well, I don't know. I wanted to find out. I know you're a Jiu-Jitsu black belt. What's your background in Jiu-Jitsu?
So I've been doing Jiu-Jitsu for quite some time. I'm 30 years old, just turned 30 in February, and I started Jiu-Jitsu when I was 15. And I initially started doing no-gi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu until when I was 18 and I went to college. I'm from Sanibel Island, Florida, went to high school in Fort Myers, Florida, and then eventually went to college in Gainesville. I was one of the kids that did not get into UF, deferred, then denied. So I was like, you know what, let me try to take the community college route, went to Santa Fe, and then ultimately when I got to I ended up dropping out of college for jiu-jitsu because I started training so much when I was in Gainesville. That's when I really picked up traditional Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which would be in the kimono. And it just took over my life, man. Lost kid, kind of didn't have any direction in life, and just started training every day. I was an athlete, and I had a coach that, shout out to my first coach, Con Ying, that was like my big coach that pushed me to compete, who's a black belt under Marcelo Garcia, and he kind of believed in me and was like, you can make a living through this, but it's not easy. You got to train really hard. He told me something that stuck with me forever. Never been great at anything. Almost has sociopathic tendencies because they get so obsessive with the pursuit of their goal that they just get tunnel visioned. And I was an impressionable young 18-year-old kid, so I was like, okay, done. That's what I got to do. I just got to train every single day for the rest of my life. And so then jiu-jitsu took over, and I trained. I mean, man, I could go on and on about my jiu-jitsu journey. I trained there till I was 21, got my brown belt in 4 years, and eventually he pushed me to move. He was like, you can't reach your goals competitively. At this time, I was competing every month, and he was like, you can't reach your goals. I was coming short, I would make the podium, but I'd get like second or third. I went to the World Championships as a purple belt, had some good matches, but didn't get the podium. And he was like, unless you go to a bigger academy with higher level world-class jiu-jitsu, I'm just going to hinder your growth. And so that led me to my journey in Boston, where I took up a position as an academy manager and a full-time instructor under a legend in the Brazilian jiu-jitsu community. His name is Bernardo Faria, and he's a 5-time black belt jiu-jitsu world champion. He's got a Wikipedia page and everything. And that also enhanced my journey, which went hand in hand with my jiu-jitsu. So not to just delve so deep into a topic, but while I was doing jiu-jitsu, I was, trying to compete. And jiu-jitsu is a sport where you have to pay to compete. You don't get paid to compete. So a tournament entry is $120. There's only so many tournaments that have expenses associated with competitions, hotels, flights. It's not cheap. It's very hard to do. So I was looking for sponsors when I was 19, 20, and I couldn't get them. So that was when I started my first business, which was a jiu-jitsu company that produced apparel and content. And that's all lead us to where we are now with Benz Fishing. But it was my first, journey into content creation and into business. And it was very successful. I grew a Facebook page in 2014 called The Jiu-Jitsu to 20,000 likes. Millions of views per month, millions of reads per month, because I would drop merchandise, and that merchandise was a terrible business model. I took every penny I ever made and I just funded my trips to compete. It was horrible. I was just literally spending all the money on myself, and I would just continue doing these limited batch drops because I never had the
Yeah.
money for more inventory. I would take all the money, spend it on jiu-jitsu training, and then I would be like, man, I don't have money to order more hats. I got to do another limited drop, and then it would be a pre-order. So I'd get pre-orders, fill the orders, take the extra money, compete. Pre-orders,
Huh.
fill the orders, take the extra money, compete. But I learned so much doing that while I was simultaneously training twice a day every day, and that all those into what's become A Benz Fishing.
So let me ask you something about the competitions that you were doing. What if you were to win first place, second place, third place, what would the payout be?
So there was no payouts. It's a
There it
very
is.
unfortunate sport
Yeah.
in regards to compensation. To make a living in jiu-jitsu, there's really only three routes. You either become one of the top 10 competitors in the world and open up, an academy and get endorsements and sponsors, or you just become a high-level guy that opens their academy. And nowadays we have instructional videos. So I actually have
Hmm.
several instructional videos that sell really well, and that's the other outlet. You can do seminars, private lessons, be a teacher, but to make a full-time living, a comfortable living, there's still not much money in the sport, and it's almost more of an investment in your time and energy to do it because, like I said, become good. You pay a monthly fee for training. The average cost of jiu-jitsu is $200 a month. You pay a monthly fee if you want to compete. The entry fees are $120. You got to go around the country to compete. Flights are insane now. It's only gotten worse. So it's definitely a noble pursuit because there's not much in it for you. And a lot
Hmm.
don't get anything. And I always tell people this. I became very high level in jiu-jitsu. I did very well at certain tournaments, but ultimately I did not ever become one of the best in the world, and I'm completely comfortable saying that. I did fall short, but the journey and the hard work and the work ethic that I learned and the people that I met leading me helped shape the person I am today. So it wasn't all for nothing in any way, shape, or form. And if I could go back and do it again, I would do everything the exact same. And I think some people look at things like jiu-jitsu or wrestling or any other sports that don't have so much monetary compensation and say it's not worth my time or it's not worth my kids' time. But a lot of the values that you can't really be measured financially, but long term they can lead you into learning things that will ultimately develop financial compensation and a comfortable living.
Man, no doubt about that. I mean, I was a wrestler in high school, and then was a coach for my kids, and then was a wrestling parent. So I was a wrestler, a wrestling parent, and a wrestling coach. All three are very different things.
Yeah.
But I learned things on the wrestling mat that I didn't realize for 30 years. And there are things that I rely on daily, that I'm just coming to the realization, well, I learned all that on the wrestling mat. Like if it hadn't been for wrestling, I wouldn't have a certain mindset. I wouldn't have certain confidence. I wouldn't have a certain work ethic. And all of that has been transferred into anything else that I do, into my relationships, into my business, into my fishing success, into anything that I've done. So much of that, when I look back on it as a more mature person in hindsight, like all that came from wrestling. It's so weird later in life to realize that, because when you're going through it, it's just hard. You don't realize that you're necessarily learning those lessons until later. You're like, why is it that I'm not afraid to put in the work here and so many other people are? And it goes back to the wrestling. I mean, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, boxing, all those sports, gymnastics too, just take a tremendous amount of work ethic. And yeah, I'm with you. Not even realizing that you're learning those lessons. It kind of reminds me, your story kind of reminds me of the fishing tournaments in the Florida Keys, early, before the internet. We had these tournaments called the Redbone Series, and we would do those, and there was no monetary compensation at all. In fact, it probably cost you money to fish in them, but when you would do it, if you were to do well in it, it would help your reputation, and then you could get booked more. Kind of like what you were talking about in jiu-jitsu. If you do really well in these tournaments, then it'll improve your reputation, and then you can open up your own academy, or you can open up something else that it kind of leads to that. So you're making money, but kind of not directly, indirectly,
Yeah, it's like
I
it's
guess.
residual effects, right? And it compounds over time, I found. But what you said about wrestling is true. Like I tell so many I joke all the time on my socials that I'm a jiu-jitsu missionary because I constantly am posting on my story or even on my videos about jiu-jitsu because I'm proud of it. I'm more proud of anything I did on the mat than anything I've ever done in fishing. Even a video that can get 10 million views doesn't even come remotely close to the feeling I have in being able to say that, it took me 15 years to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu. But I tell people, like, wrestle. It doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu. Pick up a sport, anything that's going to teach you discipline. I have a lot of young followers, and I'm like, are you in high school? Join the wrestling team. You won't regret it. It's free training. You're going to learn lifetime lessons, and you're going to learn how to defend yourself. The effects, I could go on. This could be a grappling podcast. And I could go on and on and on about all of the benefits of doing any sort of strenuous sport or activity. And in particular, for the young guns that are listening, if there are any and you're in high school or middle school, whatever age you are, if there's free wrestling, take it. I wrestled 2 years in high school, and I did it to supplement my jiu-jitsu. I didn't even compete. I just had a friend, and he joined. He happened to be a jiu-jitsu athlete that was also the assistant wrestling coach at a high school. So I would go with him to the wrestling room, and we would train and we would wrestle. And even though I wasn't formally like on a team, I still was at the practices all the time. And after I graduated high school, I would always make it a point to train with high school wrestlers. I was 21, and there's nothing like a wrestling room, whether it's high school, collegiate, middle school. The environment in there is insane, and it's an incredible place to be. But there's so much, like any sort of strenuous physical activity, I'm an advocate for, whether it's gymnastics, like you mentioned, weight training, powerlifting, anything that forces you to become a better through hard work, discipline. It's just going to pay dividends in the future. And that's like a message I really try to emulate. That's why I joke I'm the jiu-jitsu missionary. But really, I'm just like not a health and fitness missionary, but like hey, get after it and like work hard. Like you said, you learn lessons that you don't even realize until later, and you're like, I have that mindset. That's why I understand this type of work ethic. That's why I have that output, and it pays dividends for the rest of your life.
You know, in all of my fishing guiding, I would come across these people, and they would be just really into fishing, and they'd be really good at it, and they'd be able to pick it up, and especially like fly fishing for tarpon or permit, something hard. And I would start talking to them, and over time I would kind of ask them, like, what's your background in athletics? Almost always there was some wrestling in their background. Like the best fishermen that I had, they almost all had some wrestling in their background. Either that was their main sport, or they did it for a few years or something. And I've always tried to figure out, like, what is it about wrestling and jiu-jitsu that is similar to fishing that kind of draws the same type of personality to the sport. And I think it's, wrestling is like physical chess. Fishing is like chess. Like you're playing a game against the weather, against the fish, against these things that are some of the things that are in your control, some of the things that are out of your control. Very similar to being on the mat. But I've always kind of thought that was interesting. And it wasn't just like a couple. It was consistent that, like, if I had a wrestler, they were pretty good fishermen, and they liked it, and they were into it. Have you seen similar things?
I've seen that a lot, and I think it's exactly what you said. It's very detail oriented, both of them, and both of them rely on like a tenacious personality to be continuously, work towards just trying to get your goal or be perfect. And so I see so many similarities between my mindset on the mat and my mindset when I fish. The most prevalent characteristic that I have is my stubbornness and my to just like hone in on a goal and work. That's definitely the overlying characteristic that translates to both the mat and fishing. Like if, for example, if I made some spooks and I put it in my head, I was like, I need to catch a giant snook on my spook, regardless of what it takes to do it. And at the minute I put that goal in my mind, there was stop until it happened, whether it took 10 hours a day every single day for 7 days or one day for 10 minutes. Whatever it was going to be, I was going to do that. And then you couple in the detail orientation of somebody who's grappled. There's so many subtle details, and just even shooting a double leg. When do you shoot your takedown? How do you set it up? How do you finish? do. And it's like, okay, when should I go out? Where should I fish? What are the tides doing? What's the weather doing? What type of knot should I use? What type of rod should I use? And fishing is very detail oriented, and it also puts you in a position where you have to capitalize on a moment. I always tell people fishing is an interesting thing, right? Because you go out and you work so hard to, but you never even know if you're going to get the bite. And then once you get the bite, you have no idea if you're going to land the fish, and you're just consistently trying to reach that goal. And I think that's why so many people are just addicted to it, because it really does have everything that you would want to keep somebody interested, chasing after a goal, and you get that feeling of fulfillment and success. I mean, to this day, as much as I love grappling, and it is the proudest thing in my life that I've accomplished, the feeling of getting a huge fish is that it's almost identical to winning first place. It's a quick rush of endorphins, and it's a quick rush where it's like, yeah, I did it. And like, you can see that in videos and pictures. It's incredible. I also always think to myself, like, I think there's a primitive nature of fishing that is ingrained in us as human beings, kind of like the hunter-gatherer mindset, where when you get a big fish, it's almost primitive. Like, even if you're a catch and release guy like myself, aside from a couple snapper here and there, it's still just the feeling of, hey, I just accomplished this. I just caught this massive creature, and it's primitive, it's goal orientation, and it's just fulfilling, and like, it's super addicting. And there's a lot of similarities with all those feelings in jiu-jitsu too, or wrestling. It's primitive, like you're yourself against another man, and ultimately, like, there's so much similarities, which is why I see so much crossover. Like, so many of my friends that you might be familiar with, Captain Matt Budd, Captain Ben Chansey, Captain George Gods, all great fishermen, great guides, great mentors to me in a lot of ways, all heavy into jiu-jitsu. Matt's a brown years. Ben's a black belt. He's been doing it for almost 20 years. George has been doing it for over 10 years, and he's a purple belt. And there's a lot, too. There's others that I'm not mentioning, but there's a lot of crossover. And I think that anyone who's into one would probably be into the other. One thing that I do notice when I tell guys jiu-jitsu, because like I said, I'm the jiu-jitsu missionary, is they always are worried about injuring themselves and then not having the means to generate an income, which is a totally viable concern in starting any form of grappling, and it is something to be worried about. You don't want to go to your second jiu-jitsu class or wrestling class and shoot a crappy double, and now you need surgery and can't walk. So that's definitely
Right.
viable, which is why I say, like, any strenuous activity will probably suffice and help you in some way, shape, or form.
Well, especially as a guide. I mean, that if you're the jiu-jitsu missionary, I'm the fitness missionary for fishing guides, because there's so many repetitive motions, and unless you are doing other things to increase your fitness and your flexibility and mobility and strength in other ways besides just poling a boat, besides doing the same thing every day, throwing a cast net the same way, the same time, every single day, you will get hurt. You will get hurt.
Oh, I
and a lot of guys have shoulder problems. A lot of guys have lower back problems. A lot of guys have a lot of issues that could be avoided if they had a general fitness routine. And that's been my kind of thing about pushing that, is it doesn't even take that much. You just need like something else besides just the fishing, because it seems like you're really active. You're out there pulling a boat for 12 hours. Why would you need to work out afterwards? But it's like you achieve a little bit more balance within what you're doing. Like, if you can get so many overuse injuries with your shoulder by pulling a boat for 12 hours a day, or 10 hours, or 8 hours, or whatever, however long you're out there. And so for me, when I started paying much closer attention to my health and fitness, everything got better. My fishing got better, started winning more tournaments, started just being able to stay out there and guide more days in a row. And it definitely worked for me. Here's an interesting question for you. Wrestling doesn't have a belt system, but jiu-jitsu does. If fishing had a belt system, what would the benchmarks be in your opinion, just off the cuff? You probably never, I don't know. Have you ever been asked that question?
I've never been asked that, and it's a very, very interesting question. And the first thing when you said that came to mind was that I would treat fishing almost like martial arts as opposed to a specific one, right? So like jiu-jitsu is a specific martial art. So jiu-jitsu let's say, inshore saltwater fishing, whereas offshore fishing might be comparable to wrestling, and bass fishing might be, largemouth bass fishing in particular, might be comparable to a different martial art like taekwondo or sambo. And you'd have these different variations of what it is you're trying to do, and then you could maybe, because fishing as a whole is so much broader. It's like martial arts in
Well,
general.
let's just take something that you do and I do, inshore saltwater fishing.
Man, it's
Give
tough.
me a couple of benchmarks for what does it take to get your white belt? What does it take to get your each,
You're probably
you
going to
know,
dislike
like
my
what
answer because right off the,
I doubt it.
I just want to say time on the water. Like so much of it
Mhm.
to me is time on the mat, time on the water. As an instructor, I taught jiu-jitsu for 7 years. The most common question you get, hey, coach, do you think I'm getting closer to my belt? And I would just be like, man, the only way to get there, time on the mat. And the older recreational guys would hate the answer. You've been doing jiu-jitsu 5 years, but you've been doing it twice a week for 5 years, an hour each session. So let's say you're getting 2 hours a week, multiply that for the month, you're getting 8 hours a month. So for the whole year, you're getting, let's say, 100 hours. Whereas, young Johnny over there, who's 19 a day, 2 hours a day. So he's getting 4 hours a day. So in 2 days, he's already done your entire week. And now in a month, he's already done your whole year. So it's tough to keep up with
Mhm.
young Johnny. And so I say the
Right.
same thing for fishing. Even me, as somebody who's been fishing, the thing I love about fishing is I always say it's the thing that I've loved. The first thing that I remember when I started fishing seriously, I say seriously when I was 12. I come from a family of not professional fishermen, but very serious hobbyists. My grandfather, who was born in Morocco, was a big fisherman in Morocco, and then he moved to Florida. He immigrated here. He was a huge fisherman, like fished every day. It was like he just loved doing it. My father, same way. To this day, loves to fish. My older brother, I always joke that my older brother's the best fisherman I know, but he's against social media and stuff. Like he doesn't have a social media. He doesn't do anything. He's a ghost. And I'm like, you're the gray ghost of fishing because he's so good. Like to this day, people think I'm, and I'm like, man, there's so many people that are so much better that just don't post about it. They don't talk about it. My brother's one of them. I'm very humble. He'll to this day fish me under the table, and so I just think time on the water is the benchmark for that. And like I said, fishing has been there for me forever. And I started, and even then, that was when I started to get like serious time on the water. And I tell people, what happens is you develop patterns, right? So if today I don't fish, it's ever changing. So like if I go fishing, you know, twice a week, I don't have the same results as if I'm fortunate enough to go 4 times a week. And then if times a week, but not because I'm people will assume, well, you're just there 5 days a week. No, no, duh, you're gonna catch. And it's like, no, no, no. It's the knowledge that you're attaining while you're there. I went
Yeah.
Monday, I caught one snook. When did I catch it? It was at 7 p.m. This is hypothetical. Okay, what was the tide doing? It was switching to outgoing. Okay, was there a storm? What was the moon phase? It was 4 days before the full moon. Okay, so what spot was it at? It was at this spot, this depth, this water temperature. All right, let me try to use all those variables to create a bite on Tuesday. More time on the water. Take everything I learned Monday, I do it Tuesday. I get 4 snook. Oh man, that was good. I go Wednesday, I get 8. Now I've dialed in on a pattern because of the time on the water. Not because I got lucky because I was there, but because I'm studying the days that I was there.
Mhm.
And then I continue to produce. And ultimately, it's fishing. So you might skunk even after having 4 awesome days because, boom, conditions change. But that's the best way to measure any benchmark for getting a belt. Like how much time have you spent on the water inshore fishing? Well,
Yeah.
I've been
That's an
fishing since I was 12.
interesting comparison, like to young Johnny that's training twice a day. That's what happens when you become a guide. I think that now you're not just fishing when you have time, and you're not just fishing when the weather's nice, and you're not just fishing when the tide's right. You're going all the time. People are booking you on days that you would rather not be out there, and then you got to produce. And that's where I think that the real learning curve goes up, that you're expected to produce on days that previously to being a guide you wouldn't have even gone.
And you guys
You
have to
know,
you get to refer to your trips. Like, oh, I have a trip Monday through Friday. How'd I do Monday? Where'd I do good Monday? Let me try to reproduce that Tuesday. Okay.
right.
Things changed a little Tuesday. Let me try to and you're just constant it's compounding, every week. That's why to this day, like all the best fishermen I know that I hang out with are guides. I always joke the best fisherman I know right now is Matt Budd. Like Matt is just always producing, and he always jokes. I shouldn't put him on blast, but he's like, I hate fishing because he's always working, out on the boat. And him and I just bond over jujitsu these days. But the man can find a fish, you know, on land if he wanted to.
Right. Well, I mean, Matt Budd is a serious working captain that also has a commercial background. Like,
Yeah.
and that's another one. That's another level to it. If you have a commercial background, or if you spent a lot of time being the guy that caught bait for all kinds of other captains, and you're the bait guy for a little while, you don't even realize how much that's going to help you down the road. And that's what Matt Budd is. I mean, he knows where the bait is. He knows where the fish are. He can produce in a commercial setting. He can produce in a recreational setting. He's out there on days that you don't want to go, and he's producing. Like, that's a serious working captain.
Yeah, and like,
and he is outstanding.
it's all just to me. I mean, I look at it as like time on the water. There's obviously subtleties that are going to help you, like nerding out. Like, I'm a big nerdy fisherman. Like, I love to look at different things like tides, moon phases, water temperatures. I take consideration into my type of fishing. Whether it actually helps or not, I don't know. Sometimes I think it's just almost like a placebo thing, but I
Yeah.
think it helps. And there's different strokes for different folks, but for sure, the number one aspect of a good angler, and if I was going to rank belts, it would be associated with how much time have you put on the water. And it's tough,
And
right?
then
Because
also, like what you were talking about earlier, is like your coach told you that in order for you to progress any further, you're going to need to go somewhere else and be around people that are better than the people that you're currently around.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, that's when you're guiding now. Now you're expected to produce in conditions that you weren't expected to even go out in. You are now entering tournaments that you might not have even thought about entering before. And each one of those things, it comes back to exactly what you said, is that if you can surround yourself with people that are better than you at the time, your progress is going to go way up. And if you're putting yourself in situations that, like, you're not just the best guy in the room, you're now going and trying to go to a different room. Or in a fishing situation, you're not just the best guy at the dock or your marina. Now you're trying to get into a tournament somewhere else and test yourself against other people. And a lot of times you come back with your tail between your legs because there's some really good fishermen out there. But those are the times when you really, really learn the fastest, is when you get around people that are so much better than you. And if you continue to do that, all of a sudden one day you're kind of like, I think I'm maybe as good as these guys now, like, or I can hold my own, and then maybe that's the time where you need to go off and find another group of people.
I think that's good, and I think it's an important mindset to have. Like, I try to pay homage to what I call the old salts a lot on my video. I have a lot of self-deprecating humor, and people will comment back because I always say I suck at fishing. I'm like, God, I lost it. I suck at fishing. And that's my true personality. And then they're like, you don't suck, you catch giants. And I'm like, no, dude, like, there's so many people that know so much more than me. I'm just constantly trying to evolve. That's just the mindset for anything that I have in life. And you want to be around people that are better and have been doing it longer. They're always going to know more. Even if they don't produce as much as you now, like, I have friends that work for Florida Sportsman Magazine who I used to write for that are in their 60s and have been fishing these waters longer. And today I catch more than them, but that's just because they're tired and they're not going out as much as they used to. They saw fishing here. They still know how to sweep a jig better than I'll ever know. And I think it's awesome to be around people like that. I've learned so much from some people that have been in the industry for a long time and taught me little subtle things that they might not even know they were teaching me. Just like one subtle tip, hey, point. I remember Roland Martin teaching. I'm probably gonna butcher the reference, but he was teaching how to use a Senko, I believe, and it was like an old video. And he was like, if you're working a Senko, you always have to have your rod tip up, because the sensitivity when your rod tips up on a light bait like this is gonna change whether or not you feel the hit or you don't feel the hit. And he mentioned something about line watching. I've been using that technique to shrimp jig and use small soft plastics for the last 10 years. And it just goes down the pipeline, like, if I show it to somebody, it's like it came from Rowland. I'm sure Rowland learned it from somebody, and there's so much knowledge to be obtained. I also think variation is good. And I get perceived inshore guy, and I definitely prefer inshore. And I think it's good to have variation. I think it's good to, I don't film bass fishing, but I live in a neighborhood with ponds. I still go walking with the family and bring a rod and pond hop. And there's subtle things you learn bass fishing. If you look at it again in relation to martial arts, if you do jiu-jitsu, but you go to a wrestling room, you learn perspective on takedowns because they're not concerned with submissions. They just want to pin. And it's like, there's value in that. If you go to a judo gym, they don't attack the legs like they do in wrestling or jiu-jitsu. You can't grab a leg in judo anymore, but they're very good at attacking, hip tosses, trips, and upper bodies. So there's always something that is like bass fishing, land-based fishing, pier fishing, offshore fishing, all the subtle techniques that you learn in those areas are going to translate. Like I said, I spent 5 years almost in Massachusetts. And while I was training, I was still fishing. I wasn't fishing 5-6 days a week, but I would fish 3-4 days a week. And when I was in Massachusetts, I became what they call I would frequent the Cape Cod Canal, which is an infamous land-based spot that to this day I love fishing for striped bass. And I learned so much from old canal rats there about working a jig and different approaches to tackle and so many things. And I think all that stuff is so valuable. That's why it's awesome for me to get to talk to you. I watched your show, like I remember. And you guys were teaching so much subtle tips every time. I remember I don't know what channel it was for other people, but it was 61 on Versus. All the fishing shows would like stream or Outdoors Network.
Yeah.
Like it was just, man, what a time. I feel like it's
That
hard to
was a
find
good time.
fishing on TV these days because we're at this weird time frame where we're getting a lot of people watching on YouTube, and then there's still a lot of people watching that traditional media and legends like, Carter Andrews still has a show going, George, but you also have these big YouTubers coming up that are producing big numbers, and there's a wider array of fishing content available, but it's different. We're at a point where I think things are changing. We see that in the show
Yeah.
that I wanted to talk about here that we just did with Discovery, which was the Sunrun series. The
Sure.
idea
Let's
for
talk
the
about that.
show was it was pitched to 4 creators, and it was from Outdoor Fishing Network, Sport Fishing Channel, Saltwater Sportsman, lots of big, ultimately airing on Discovery. And they were like, hey, we want to find a way to merge the YouTube perspective with traditional TV. And so we'd like to create a show that's entertaining and can be aired on TV, but still incorporate the uniqueness of YouTube. And ultimately came up with was to set up a competition in search of viral fishing moments. So myself and Ryan Izquierdo were a team. Ryan is fishing, and then the other team was a creator called Fishaholic and a creator called See a Dude. And we were sent to the Keys in Hawks Cay for 1 week, and we were set out on a mission to do of how we fish, where we fish. They wanted it to be uncharted, and they were just like, just pretend we're not here. We want you guys to just fish the way you would fish and try to create the same content that you would create regularly, and we want to document it. So that's why I've been telling people it's like a docu-series, and the idea behind it was the competition views, so the team with the most views is going to win, and then the other aspect was the biggest fish. And so it was interesting to see how things worked. And even in talks with the producers of the TV show now, like they're going to be using our GoPro. So like the GoPro on the chest is very unique to YouTube fishing, the POV.
Mm-hmm.
Typically on, traditional TV and media, you're only seeing front-facing footage, meaning a big camera or a second boat or a drone. Whereas on YouTube, you're constantly seeing the chesty or the GoPro mount. And I think this is going to be one of the few times they're going to include that footage on an actual TV show. So I'm very interested to see how the producer it, but it was an amazing experience, and it was also incredibly unique for me to see how TV works. And I got to tip my hat off to you and every other TV guy out there, because it is much more arduous, much more of a regular career and job, and much more work than it is to do YouTube. And you're constantly working with a team. You're constantly listening to producers. You're discussing what needs to be seen, what the viewers need to see. And it's just a much more, YouTubers are going to hate me for saying this, but it's much more professional. YouTube is like, hey, I'm going out with my chesty and my 3 GoPros and my drone if I want. I'm going to film whatever I want to film. You have full autonomy. You're doing everything yourself, which in a sense of like editing and work, yeah, it might be more time consuming, but doing TV felt more like a traditional job where I felt like I had to be part of a team and I had to listen to what these people wanted from me and do it properly to have a good representation of their brand. It was a lot of work, man. It was a lot of work. That show was amazing, but it was a lot of work. Even just like I'd be talking to Ryan on the boat, and the camera person would be like, "Hey, can you say that again? But can you shorten it?" And I'd be like, "Okay, so let me think. Okay, okay, can you say it one more time, but say it over here? The lighting's better." Okay?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Over here, and it's like it's still it's still reality TV. Like it's the actual conversation we were having, but we had to do multiple takes to, have the best product for the TV. Whereas on YouTube, like it's not nearly as professional in that sense. Like things needed to be done very, very well, and so it was it was really experience. And
So is that over? Is it just 1 week and that's it?
the shooting
Or-
was only 1 week. It's 3 episodes, 22-minute episodes on Discovery, and it airs in October. And the content creators also created videos. So I already finished my videos. They're performing very well. I've already amassed short form views, so that's 90 seconds or less. And long form views are up to 25,000 as of right now and climbing. So I made a 40-minute episode about the first 5 days there, and then I made one more 30-minute episode about the second day there. And it's a great show. Everybody has their own perspective. A lot of stuff happened. There was some competition. There was some decisions made. For example, like one of my videos, the team Invasive Species, Fishaholic and Sea Dude had been fishing offshore more because they had a bigger boat. I brought my Mako 18 LTS. Capable boat unless the conditions are good. They had a 24-foot sea hunt, I believe. So they had a much, their gunnels were much higher. The boat was just more capable. So they were fishing offshore quite a bit and having some pretty good results. On the last day of shooting, the producers said, why don't we offshore? And why don't we just have all the creators on one boat fishing? It might be cool. But remember, we have full autonomy. So I use that autonomy in making my decision. I don't like offshore fishing quite as much. So I was like, look, I just caught an amazing permit, and my audience is more keen to inshore fishing. Go catch a really big tarpon and a bonefish to get an inshore slam. Spoiler alert, I didn't get the inshore slam. So it was a point of contention in the show where I was like, look, I'm going to go. They're like, if you're going to go do that, you have to go alone, because we're sending the camera crew with the other 3 creators, which is fair. There's more content to be made going offshore with 3. Like, that's fine. I'm going to go. And they thought I was nuts. They're like, you're really going to stay? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to stay. And I ended up catching the best fish of the trip. And we have an ongoing argument on whether it's the biggest fish of the trip, because you can't pull tarpon out of the water. But I think it was the biggest fish of the trip. It was probably a 70 to 80 pound class tarpon. And I ended up catching it carbon leader with a Van Staal VSB 50, which is like a 4,000 size reel, when I was trying to target juvies. There was tarpon all around me. I couldn't buy a bite. It was one of those days, man, where the frustration levels were through the roof. I saw hundreds, and I was fishing over at Long Key Bridge. The water was clear. I was floating crab rods, with 60-pound fluorocarbon leader and 8.0 hooks, trying to have the proper equipment for a triple-digit tarpon. And for 2 hours, I just watched them eating crabs right next to the boat, but they wouldn't touch mine. I saw them nose up to the crab and feel mine. I swear, people don't believe me. I saw them nose up to it, or the leader, and just pass it off and go to the next one. And it was so frustrating.
They'll do that.
Huh?
They'll do that.
Okay, so you would know better than anyone. And I was just getting so frustrated, so I was like, you know what, let me tie on a little voodoo shrimp and try to catch some of the juvies that I saw around. First cast legitimately with that little voodoo shrimp on my light rod, what is giant relative to the tackle, and then a 30-minute fight ensued. She towed the boat with the outgoing tide, about a mile out from Long Key. Very patient, methodical fight, solo, but ended up getting my hands on the fish, landing the fish, unhooking, trolling her around to revive her, and getting a nice, healthy. By the end of that, it was almost evening. There was no more sunlight to go even try to get bonefish. So I got what I thought was my best fish of the trip, but it was a big risk. And all that's going to unfold in the show, but it was an interesting show because theoretically it was a unique circumstance for me to have the autonomy like that. They were not happy with it, but I was like, I'm going inshore. I'm going to go get a tarpon.
Well, they'll be happy with it because it'll make for some...
It was awesome
they'll edit
after.
it right, and it'll make for some drama that nobody thought you should make that decision, and you make it, and it pays off.
Yeah.
I can already see it.
And they
It's
killed
gonna
it
work.
offshore, by the way. They killed it
Did
offshore.
What were they catching offshore?
They caught some blackfin tuna, and then Ryan had a beautiful queen fish. They went to the marathon humps, and they were
Mm-hmm.
deep dropping jigs, like 600-700 feet, and he caught a queen snapper. Which again,
Nice.
I'm a white belt in offshore fishing. Happy to say it, and apparently that's an extreme out at the humps there. And so it was a big queen, and then they caught some blackfins, which I think that's much more regular out there. But they had a good time, and the banter was funny. I've seen a lot of their footage, and it's awesome. They did encounter a huge storm on the way in, where the seas kicked up to like 5, 6 on that 24, and they were on the way in. Like they were like,
I bet.
it was
Probably
sketchy.
good you weren't out there and you're 18.
Yeah, dude, the water would have, yeah, that would have sunk.
Yeah.
Shout out to Mako. It's a great boat, but that's it was bad out there.
Before we were talking about how your jujitsu and your entrepreneurship in the digital business led to what you're doing now. What was that step like?
So I still have a career. This people are very confused when I tell them I genuinely work 40-hour work weeks. I work remotely. I've been working for the same company for a decade. And so I sponsored myself. I'll try to shorten the story a little to do jiu-jitsu, going back to that. I made a website, sold hats, sold shirts. I did very well in sales. Like I was making a very fair amount of money for a 19-year-old kid that was a mat bum. And so ultimately, I wasn't profiting because I was just taking the money out of the business. And so I might have taken a trip that I shouldn't have taken with my friends to Vegas at one point. Like there was some pretty bad decisions made. We might have stayed at the Bellagio.
Hey, you're 19, you know?
Dude, yeah. It was a pretty interesting time of life, and I needed a break. But anyways, sucked the money out of the business and just orders. And I was like, it's getting messy, and the hype kind of died. It was more of like a scarcity thing, and then the sales were kind of stagnating to where it wasn't going to be a viable source of income. So I just thought, I built this website, sold this much in goods, created a very good following on Facebook. Facebook ads around 2012 or 13, and we were one of the first Facebook pages to have a lot of success utilizing Facebook marketing in 2014. I was putting ads on short form video in 2014 when there was no such thing as short form video because it was just a quick jiu-jitsu technique. And then at the end, I would be like, check out our hats to the page. And those ads were killing it. So long story short, I was like, let me do this for other people. So I started a business called Gainesville Digital Agency, which was one person, and it was me. And I made a phone line that was like, thank you for calling Gainesville Digital Agency. Press 1 for marketing. Press 2 for sales. And all
Nice.
Mr. Aaron.
Nice.
And I got a lot of clients and started doing really well with that. And then one day, I was told by my instructor at the time that this guy, Bernardo Ferrillo, was starting a company selling jiu-jitsu instructional videos, and I should reach out to him. So I reached out to him and discussion, and he was like, hey, I would love to have you do some work for us through Gainesville Digital Agency. And I also, am going to be opening a jiu-jitsu school because we had like a 2-hour phone call, and he's like, and I'm looking for guys like you. Maybe you come train with me. So eventually I'd go to that school. So I started working for him right away, remotely based blog work. I wrote some articles about jiu-jitsu, and they loved the work. They also loved the turnaround time. I've always been a really hard worker. And so he was like, hey, can you work for us full time? And so I had this shtick that I had this big company when meanwhile I was working enough to make what I needed, but I wasn't ambitious anyway. Like I'm not that type of guy. And so I was like, well, Bernardo, I've got all these clients, man. If you want me to work for you, you're going to have to, what I thought was this huge number. I was like, you're going to have to pay me this much. And he was like, done. Can you move here? And I was like, sure. And he's like, I'll give you a job as the manager of my school. I'll let you teach jiu-jitsu, and I'll build this to work on the business, which is called BJJ Fanatics or Fanatics LLC, while you're here. And I was like, holy smokes, this is like 3 jobs in one place. Like I'd be dumb to turn this down. So I talked to like my dad, who's a mentor of mine. He's I've seen him go up and down in business. 7 stores and then have 0. I've seen him have nice cars and then watched him get repossessed. So I know the journey of the entrepreneur from watching him. And he was like, you got to take the leap. Like you're 20 years old, you got to go. At the time I had my girlfriend, who's now my wife and the mother of our beautiful girls. And we had been dating a year, and I basically told her, I was like, like, you should go. And I was like, okay. And I was ready to go without her. And she was like, I'm going with you. So we both went and we moved to Boston. All this happened in like a week. I had been working for that company for about 8-9 months at this point, about to turn 21, and got there and then started training. Started managing the school, learning a different business, and then was just working full time for them, doing these blogs and doing these products. And at the time, the company hadn't really exploded. 1 year into my journey working for them there, the company blew up like crazy. Like they started to make, a lot of sales, started to become the brand for jiu-jitsu instructional videos. And then ultimately that led to them having multiple businesses, 12 different instructional video sites. We're now the largest sports instructional distribution website chain in the world. I was like the second person or first person they ever hired. Still work for them, still love them. I'm currently the senior product manager there, and I love my job. It's an awesome place to be, and that led me into fishing because when I was there, COVID happened. And so during the COVID lockdown, jiu-jitsu was basically illegal in Massachusetts. Massachusetts was tough, man. Like at one point,
Yeah.
you were told at restaurants you had to wear a mask unless chewing. If you get what I'm saying, right? So I was like, okay, we are in the clown show right now. Like I need to get out of here and go back to Florida. So my wife is from here originally, Port St. Lucie. Her family lived here. She did not want to come back to her hometown, but I was like, listen, it's 2019, 2020. We should just go there. And so right at the beginning of COVID, we could see where things were going. We were very fortunate that we had some money saved from working so much there. We bought a house sight unseen here and just moved here on a whim. And it took us a little bit because we had to finish out our lease up there. So back here at the end of 2020 or 2021, if I remember correctly. And then when we got here, I had already been doing some fishing work because I couldn't train jiu-jitsu for like 6 months because of COVID.
Right.
So what did I do besides work from home? I can only work so much. So I was fishing every day. I was fishing every single day. And during my time there, she was like, you're obsessed with that. Why don't you like make an Instagram? You're so good at social media. You do it for all these other people. Like do it for something you're passionate about finally. Because I always complained. I was like, I never really monetized my true passions of like fishing or stuff like that. So she that Instagram while I was at the Cape Cod Canal, which is why the people that dislike me, I don't even like to call them haters, will say, oh, he's a nor'easter. And it's like, nah, dude, I was born and raised in Florida. I lived here till I was 20 years old, and then I spent some time there. But anyways, I fished that place, posted about it, started to get some traction. And it was when Instagram introduced Reels, right? Like they were trying to compete with TikTok. And so, again, my wife, shout out to her, said, why don't you post some videos? You come home and show me all these videos of you putting your phone on this rock while you fish. Why don't you do something with it? I'd like lay my phone down on a rock just to watch myself. And I was like, you think I should post it? She's like, yeah, post it. And so then I started making reels, and like right away, like within days, it was like 10,000 views, 15,000 views. And it started to catch wind. And then On the Water magazine reached out to me from the videos, and they're like, hey, you're fishing the canal a lot. Would you ever be interested in working with us? So then I started writing some articles for On the Water magazine. And then that opened another door. And then the Instagram continued to grow. And then by the time I moved from Massachusetts, I already had like 20,000 followers. And I was like, well, this is something. Like I'm making money writing articles. It's a side hustle. It doesn't I'm fishing anyways. I might as well continue doing this in Florida, the fishing capital of the world. So I just did what I used to do. I've snook fished my whole life. So I started snook fishing and continued making videos. And then it just continued to grow. And it became A Benz Fishing. And then I started a YouTube because everybody was like, start a YouTube. And then I met a sportsman who watched the videos and was like, hey, have you ever wrote? And I was like, well, coincidence, I've wrote for On the Water. And they're like, write for us. And then I met all those guys. And then from there, they led me to Saltwater Sportsman, who now supplies the boat that's in my driveway. And everything just continued to grow. And all of that just happened from everything that I learned working that I've worked for in Massachusetts and working for myself as a jiu-jitsu entrepreneur. And now I have A Benz Fishing. I'm one of the few creators that, I think I'm fortunate because of my background. I have my own website. I make my own lures. I'm able to monetize it in different ways. And to this day, it's still a side hustle. And I joke, especially with a family now, people think. I think people think I fish 7 days a week. Realistically, I fish, 2, 3 days a week, and they're 4-hour trips. I'm more calculated than I ever was with when I go out, but I'm only fishing like 8 to 12 hours a week, and it's not as time consuming as people think. And my best piece of advice to anybody who wants to get into content and stable, steady job so that you're not chasing the dollar and work around the clock to try to get to a point where you can live off of that. I'm at a point now with fishing that I'd have to, full disclosure, downsize my lifestyle, but I could make a living fishing at this point. I could. It might not be the living that I want for, I could do it. And at this point, I just don't see a reason for me to ever leave what I'm doing. I enjoy it. It's very easy. I work remotely. I work when I want, where I want, and I also have fishing. And I'm a very patient, methodical person who I am completely comfortable with a very slow, consistent strategy. And I also am a very big advocate for multiple streams of income. And so to me, my wife's a dog trainer. I help her run her dog training business. We just have a lot of things going on, and everything's going well, so there's no reason to ever stop one to do the other. We can manage everything, and until we get to a point where it's overwhelming, it all goes hand. Because I've
awesome,
now
man.
learned things from fishing that have translated to my career. I've become
Mm-hmm.
so much better at short form, at video editing. I've seen how different fishing companies, are run structurally on the inside. And I've been able to learn things from people who are in the corporate world and bring them back to my managerial position at work. And it made me excel in my career more than ever because I have a unique perspective on things. And it's all full circle. Sometimes days seem very crazy and overwhelming. But as long as I'm young and the engines are running good, I'm just going to keep at it, dude. That, like you
Man.
said about fitness, like even for me, I lift weights 3 times a week. I do jiu-jitsu 2, 3 times a week. And 1 hour sessions of some form of activity, like, yeah, it would be a lot. But anytime I'm stressed, you do something like that, you come back to where you were, you're like, that's not that bad. I can manage.
Right. Yes, 100%. So a couple of things I take away from that. First of all, for people that have listened to this podcast a lot, we always talk about this entrepreneurial journey where someone has, a moment where they can jump from one career to another. You just perfectly described it. But more importantly than that, for people that are young and they are looking for a relationship, they're wondering if this person that you are with is the right person for you. If you're looking for a wife or a partner, you want one just like Aaron has. His wife pushed him to do what he wanted to do, supported him when he needed it, and then challenged him even more. I love that story, man. That is awesome. And
She's amazing.
it's really awesome. And it's like so many people say, behind every good man is a good woman. Like, it sounds super cliche, but it's not cliche at all. It's the way that I feel about my wife, and it's super cool to hear you say that story about your wife and what she has done to challenge you, to push you, and to really push you into the unknown. Like, you don't know, none of this that you've created was a known thing. And she said, look, that's what you're passionate about. Do it.
Yeah.
Like, do it. That's so awesome. And that's what you're looking for. Like, if you are questioning what you're looking for in a partner, that's it, in my opinion.
I agree.
Like, a lot
100%.
of people might say something else.
That's great advice. There's so much vanity in the world today, and people look for things for reasons I feel like they didn't used to. I'm only 30. You're older than I am, and it's just like, I don't know. I think the most important thing is her support. She always asks, "What's your favorite characteristic of me?" And it's cliche, and I'm like, "Your support." That's it. Just your support. She's like, "Oh, I've told it to her. We've been together almost 9 years now, married 5, and we have a family now." And I'm like, to this day, she's always shocked when I say that. I'm like, "No, like, your support, because without it, I can't do what I'm doing." And to this day, she supports me. Like I said, we have our own. Now we're selling spooks, and we pack up 100 orders in a night. She's right there with me once the girls are asleep, and she does all that for me because she knows I have other jobs. She's like, "Don't you have to work, on your fanatic stuff? Go, I just take over and do it." And it's like, yeah, so a partner, like a true partner, they're hard to come by, but they're out there, and you will meet somebody who only makes you better. And then I try to reciprocate that. Like I said, she is a dog training business, and she was the head dog trainer at Petco in Boston, Mass., one of the biggest Petcos in the country. And she would show me her paycheck. make for the dogs that she was training, and I was like, there's this highway robbery. You could do this yourself. Why do they get 70%? She was nervous, and I was like, let's go. And I made her a website, whipped it up quick, made some ads for her, and I was like, go. And boom. She ended up becoming like a super successful dog trainer while we lived in Boston. These days, it's...
Y'all are perfect together. That's great.
Right, yeah, man.
That's what you're looking for. All right. So usually I have a little portion of the podcast that we call the hot seat. Usually we do it at the beginning, but we got started on this awesome conversation and hearing your story, which I'm really happy that you were able to tell to this audience, because there's going to be so many people that get some major inspiration. But we're going to close out with this one. Okay. So the hot seat are a series of either or questions. You don't put a lot of thought into them, and then I have a couple of questions that we'll close out on afterwards. So you ready to go?
I'm ready to rock and roll.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Text or call?
Text.
Jiu Jitsu or fishing?
Oh, Jiu Jitsu. That hurt.
Competing or training?
Training.
1 million now or 10 million later?
10 million later.
Inshore or offshore?
Inshore.
Coffee or energy drink?
Coffee.
This one came from my daughter. A Chihuahua or a hairless cat?
Chihuahua. We got 3 dogs.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
The desert or the Arctic?
Desert.
And in the spirit of the Olympics, favorite Olympic sport?
Wrestling.
Least favorite Olympic sport?
What's the one where they scrape the floor?
That's curling.
Curling. Probably curling.
Yeah, okay. Least favorite fish to catch?
Catfish.
I'm with you. Freshwater or saltwater?
Saltwater.
Spinner bait caster?
Spinner. That was a tough one.
Me too. All right. Okay, so that's the hot seat. Now, something that takes a little bit more thought. What's the worst advice you remember being given?
I think just being told I couldn't do something. Honestly, it's cliche. I've had disagreements with my parents. We're all a very close family, and they've both inspired me to be the best version of myself. But as parents should, when you tell them you're dropping out to do jiu-jitsu, it's not a good reaction. So there's been some times where I've been told, even by them, like, I don't know, dude. And so just, I don't know, that lights a fire under me where I'm like, I think I can do that. So.
Okay. So the worst advice sometimes is an inspiration.
Yep.
What about, could you remember either the best advice you remember being given, or some really good advice you remember being given?
Honestly, I think that the thing that changed me the most was what I told you in the beginning. When my original jiu-jitsu coach that pushed me, made me believe that I could do that, saying, it sounds so bad, like, don't be a sociopath, but saying that all people that are successful in any sport at the highest levels almost have sociopaths, in a bad way, because that can be a con. Like, trust me, my wife and I have had some serious arguments. I don't want people to think like life is perfect. Like, we argue a lot, and a lot of it comes from my obsessive tunnel vision. And so I think that was an amazing piece of advice that made me realize what I needed to do to achieve things that I wanted to get.
Very good. I agree about the sociopathic tendencies with people that are high performers. There's not a lot of balance. A lot of people have asked me that. Like, how do you achieve balance in your life? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, maybe eventually you can create balance, but if you're going to be really good at anything, there's going to be a period in your life that you had to do basically nothing but that. You can look back at your jiu-jitsu. You can look at what you're doing with fishing. For me, it was fishing guiding. You know, go 175 days in a row, no days off. Like that's sociopathic. That's not healthy
that's crazy
at all.
And that's why you are who you are.
Okay, so is there a book that you've liked so much that you gave it as a gift?
I gave one cliche book as a gift, Discipline Equals Freedom by Jocko.
Yes, very good.
Yeah, I gave that as a gift. I was like, this is a super easy read. Take it at face value. It's exactly what it says is what it means. You know, there's no hidden message. And that's a good book.
Love it. Well, we'll end on that, man. Aaron, I really enjoyed getting to know you a lot better. I've been following you on Instagram, and certainly I didn't even realize that BJJ Fanatics, you had a part in that, and I've been following that account for a long time.
Really? Yeah.
So yeah, man, I love it. And now, so the wrestling, is there going to be more of a focus on wrestling?
This is also another company that we own. So Fanatic Wrestling, BJJ Fanatics, Dynamic Striking. There's so many different ones, and it's all just been based off of the original, the OG BJJ Fanatics. And so we are, I mean, man, we've made videos with Mike Tyson at this point. You know, all the top tier wrestlers. So cool. It's an awesome place to be, and it's awesome to see the growth.
That's so cool. All right, so how can everybody follow you and support what you're doing?
Yeah, just Benz Fishing on YouTube, Benz Fishing on Instagram, and then abenzfishing.com if you want to try some of my spooks and get some merchandise. They work. You can check the Instagram to see it.
Right on. All right, Aaron, that's it for today. We'll be back next week with another awesome guest just like Aaron, and go give him a follow if you're not already following him. And we'll see you next week. See ya.